Welcome. So for today, for this little section here, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the reason why Google Sheets and other spreadsheet applications were invented, and that's the ability to do math very quickly and very easily. And so they have certain functions built in that you can access pretty easily, and that will make your life a lot easier. So I have here a data set. This is one of my classes, physics classes. These are the 7 tests and the 1 semester exam that they've taken over the course of the year. So this is one way that I check to make sure that students are progressing a little bit, and that is to try to chart their progress to see if they're improving overall. I told my students earlier in the year that physics tends to be one of those topics that's the difficulty is front-loaded, but then once you have that under your belt, you kind of see that increase. So hopefully we see that as I do some of this analysis here. So the first thing I'm going to do, just to analyze this as thoroughly as I can, is I'm going to try to find the average over the course of the year. So I'm going to click in this first cell right here, and I'm going to hit the equal sign to be able to let Google know that I want it to do some math for me. And then I'm going to choose the average function. Now, average is just very simply, you type in the word average, and then you have some parentheses right there. And then in the parenthesis, we want to go ahead and put in the things that we want to average. So the things that I want to average, there we go, things that I want to average are all of these test scores. So I've highlighted the entire set for that particular student, and then I hit enter, and it tells me the student has a 73.9 as an average. So I'm just going to remember that that's the average score right there. Now, in a previous video, I went ahead and talked to you about this handle right here. Remember, the handle can be clicked and dragged down to be able to do the exact same thing for multiple data points or rows or columns, whatever you're doing. So I've then gone ahead and copied that same formula for each row. Unfortunately, what this does is it also changes my fill formatting, so I'm going to have to go back and change that later on anyway. But that's okay. I'm going to leave it as is right now. Now, as you look at this, I know you can't see all of it because of the video, but as you look at this, you can see there's one in particular that is a bit of a problem, and I know that she's had trouble all year, and so I've really been trying to work with her. But as you can see, for the semester 1 exam, 49.7 was not what we were hoping for. She's been kind of dancing right on the edge of passing. Her lab work is usually pretty decent. She does a good job, but it never translates over to the test scores. So this is my one, in this class in particular, this is my one area of most need. 73.9 is a little on the low side just for that particular student as well, but again, not as worried as this 51.9 right there. Otherwise, they're pretty good. So that's how we use the average function. Now, average function is pretty straightforward. It's again the one that I use the most. You could do other things as well, and that is you could try to find the average for a particular test, which is helpful. So I'm going to do the same thing, average for the test, and then I'm going to click and drag down for that, and then hit enter. There we go. Now I'm going to click and drag this across so that I can get the average for all of those tests. And so you see my test averages are pretty good overall. I don't feel too bad about that. I would love to say that I picked a class at random, but I did cherry pick this class just a little bit because I knew that the averages wouldn't make me look too bad. So there you go. There's the averages overall for the tests. Things look pretty good across there, but again, I'm not sure because average doesn't tell you everything. And so one of the other things I like to calculate is the standard deviation. Standard deviation is just a measure of how spread apart the numbers are in your data set. So if you have a data set, you could have an average that was good, but you could have a wide spread of your data, and that's in some cases that's not really a good thing to have. Most cases, for tests, that's not a good thing to have. So I'm going to go ahead and do standard deviation. Now, to calculate standard deviation, it's very similar to average, only you use the standard deviation function, which is stdev, and then in parentheses I want to select the data set again, just like that. So standard deviation of 5.5 out of 100 is pretty darn good, but I guarantee it's not like that on all of these. So there we go. As you can see, here the spread for this last test, the Unit 7 test, was a lot bigger. Here the spread for the Unit 4 vectors test was a lot bigger. So that is a little concerning, because that means that if the average is 82, that means that you could have somebody 82 minus 17 is the lower end of that main section of groups of students. So that's not exactly what I was hoping for. It's in the mid 60s. So really not great as far as that's concerned. Ideally, we'd see that the average would be high and the standard deviation would be low. Anyway, so there's a couple of other things that we can do. So this was, let's see, average. That was standard deviation. And then we could also find the median if you wanted to. It's pretty easy. You just hit equals and then median. And then in the parentheses, you select your data set again and hit enter. So the median score for that was pretty good. Not a surprise there, for this, since that was a lab practical. But you can see that some of the others, the median scores are not, I guess they look pretty good across. 89, no, let's say some of these are pretty good. So this particular test is concerning a little bit, and I'll show you why in a different video, actually. When we talk about doing a histogram, it's concerning because it looks like if the average is 82 and the median is 89 or 90, that means that I probably had a group of students that did really well, and then another group of students that didn't. And so I'll take a look at that in another video. Some other possible things that you might want to use. Sometimes it's nice to be able to count how many things you have. Like, for example, let's say we had a test in which you had some students miss it. Or let's say you were lazy and you didn't want to count up the number of tests that you had. That's probably a better one. So I could go in here and have Google count for me. So I could say count if, and then I can go ahead and tell it whatever I want to count. So in this case, let's just say I want to count the number of tests that the student scored above a 75%. So I'm going to go ahead and select the range first. I want to check all of these tests. Okay. And then comma, now I have to tell it what I want it to check. And so I hit the quotation marks, the double quotation marks, and I say, let's say, greater than 75. End quotation marks, and then end parenthesis, and I can go ahead and hit enter. And then I can click and drag that down as well. And so this tells me how many times that student scored over 75%. So again, this particular student right here did well only on the lab practical at the beginning. And so you can see this is another indication that the student is not doing well. Again, there's another way to do it. I'm going to come over here, and one of the cool things that happens in Infinite Campus, although I turn it off all the time, but you can do it in Google Sheets as well, is a sparkline. So I can show what the sparkline looks like. So I just hit equals again, and I do sparkline, and I go ahead and highlight all of the things I want in my sparkline, and then end parenthesis, and there it gives me a very general kind of up and down graph, so I can see how things are going. So this student in particular, you can see, faltered a little bit early on, but obviously faltering doesn't mean as much quite to that student. 83 is not really faltering, but you can see has improved quite a bit. And so what I'm looking for in these sparklines is that the general improvement, like this student right there, or let's see, the student in general is improving, this student in general is improving, and so on. And so hopefully that's what you see is that general improvement overall. So ranking is another thing you can do, and I'm going to go ahead and click in this cell right here, and I'm going to tell it equals again to make sure that it knows that I'm going to do some math. So I'm going to type in rank. Then I have to pick a couple of things here. So first I want it to rank this average, comma. I want it to compare it to all of the averages. Okay, comma. Now if I click 0 right here, then it tells the computer to make sure that the greatest number has the rank of number 1, and then the least number has the rank of whatever is the end. If I change that to a 1, that means that it flips it around. So I'm going to go with that one right there. So I'm going to go with the rank right there. And again, I'm going to click and drag this down as best I can. There we go. And I just want to confirm that that looks good. So here comes a feature that I want to make sure about, just to make sure you guys got this. For this particular feature, the data set is the trick. Now, the data set, the K3 right here, when I click and drag it down, becomes K4, and then later on it becomes K5, and then K6, and so on. But the data set I want to stay stationary. So here's how we make sure that that's stationary. See how it says K3 to K25? I want to go ahead and use what's called an absolute reference. So I'm going to go ahead and use a $sign in front of the 3 and a $sign in front of the 25. And what that tells Google Sheets, and Excel of course too, is that I want to keep the 3 and the 25 absolutely the same no matter how I click and drag it down. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK with that, and then I will click and drag it down for real this time. There we go. Much better. Okay, so I can go through and see who's got the highest rank in the class, who needs the most help. Obviously, our number 23 student here is having some troubles. Number 22 as well. You can see, and it goes on and on. So it's not a bad way to do it. And you can sort by rank if you wanted to, using the data, and then sort up here by the column if you wanted to. So you can kind of address those people who are having issues. Any last things? There's a way to standardize or make into a normal curve, like a statistical curve if you wanted to. Your grades, I use that every now and then if I need to curve, which I try not to do very often. There's also, you can choose random numbers, so there's a function called rand between, and then you tell it what the low number should be and the high number should be, and it will tell you random numbers. So I use that to group students every now and then. There's even, I don't know, I don't use this, but there's even access to Google Translate, and so I think that's kind of fun to be able to put in a word, have the students enter a word, and it'll repeat it back in French. Again, don't know why I would use that in physics, but you could do that for just about any language that Google Translate can use. Oh, there's one last thing, and that is sometimes it's helpful to have a timestamp or a date stamp on your work. And so you can just do equals and then today, and then hit, whoops, and then hit OK. Let's see, equals today. There we go. Oh, and it thinks it's a number. There we go. I don't want that. I want the date format. There we go. So there it is, and you can do that for anything, equals today, and as long as it doesn't think it's a number like I accidentally set that to, you should be good to go. By default it's not set to that, so it should be easy enough. Okay, hope that was helpful. Sorry it was a little bit on the long side, but there were a lot of functions that we wanted to talk about. If you have any questions, let me know. I'll be walking around.